Wait, how does this work?
You just press the button.
This one?
No, not that one.
You're listening to Press the Button, a Ploughshares Fund podcast dedicated to nuclear policy and national security.
Everything seems impossible till it happens.
Everyone would be affected by a nuclear war.
Our government is planning to spend trillions of dollars to develop new nuclear weapons that we don't need.
You can't win a nuclear war.
We are all experts on nuclear weapons because we are all going to be affected by those nuclear weapons.
And here are your hosts, Joe Cirincione and Michelle Dover.
Welcome back to the 31st episode of Press the Button. I'm Michelle Dover, your host today. Joe is actually out in California where he attended Hollywood Health and Society Sentinel Awards. Be sure to look them up on Twitter. They honored Chernobyl. But you'll hear him later in the show. First, we'll start with early warning, where I will be discussing Iran, the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the race between Boeing and Northrop Grumman to see who will rebuild the new ICBMs. And for our Q&A, Joe will answer a question from a listener, actually, in California. For the interview, Joe will be sitting down with Colleen and Tristan Guyette of Beyond the Bomb. And these activists will be talking through the importance of grassroots advocacy work that they are doing out in the United States on college campuses to push for the adoption of a no first use policy. As always, if you like what you hear, please rate, subscribe, share, tell us what you think. Your feedback is really important to us, and we try to incorporate that into our show. But first, the news.
And now, early warning, early warning, early warning, early warning. A 7-minute synopsis of this week's nuclear news.
Welcome back to Early Warning. I'm your host, Michelle Dover, and today I am joined by Ariane Tabatabai, Adjunct Senior Research Scholar at Columbia University. Welcome, Ariane.
Thanks for having me.
And Tom Collina, Director of Policy here at Ploughshares Fund. Welcome back, Tom.
Great to be here.
You guys know the drill, literal drill, 7 minutes to cover the news, so let's go. Ariane, Iran announced that it has restarted uranium enrichment at Fordow, one of its enrichment sites. And as expected, Iran is taking actions every 90 days that there is no sanctions relief. So can you put in context for us what this step means from a proliferation perspective as well as a political one?
Yeah, so this is the fourth step that Iran is taking in dialing down its compliance with the deal. Since May this year, President Rouhani announced that Iran would be taking steps and giving the Europeans specifically 2 months each time to react and to give Iran what it wants in terms of access to banking and also the ability to export its oil. Of course, none of these things are happening really, and so Iran keeps taking incremental, very well-calculated steps. And I have to say what has been interesting to watch is that the Iranian process has been very deliberate in a way that the U.S. one was not. So the Iranians have been really able to maximize their leverage, whereas the United States essentially burned all of its leverage from the get-go, saying we're going to pull out without necessarily thinking about how to replace the deal and what would come next. So this is the most significant step that Iran has taken so far. And it's been interesting to watch that the first couple of steps were not as significant. The third one was on research and development. So Iran was learning things as it went. And that means that it can't unlearn things. And this one is, of course, in a facility that has long been very controversial and that the negotiators made a key point of addressing in the JCPOA.
Well, and that was not the only news coming out of Iran. We also heard that Iran revoked the credentials of an IAEA inspector who set off alarms, apparently walking through an explosives detector. And we've had these conversations before in the context of Iran of will they or will they not provide access to their facilities. what do you think? Is this a one-off or is this the start of a broader issue?
Yeah, to be seen, right? And, it is troubling by itself. But of course, if this becomes the first of many incidents in which Iran tries to undermine IAEA inspectors' access to facilities, then we are potentially seeing a much more significant sort of escalation in the nuclear realm by Iran. If it's a one-off, it's still troubling, but it may not be as problematic.
And you mentioned Iranian decision-making. I want to give a shout out to your recent report through RAND in which you look at what Iran's domestic decision-making processes are. Thank you for unpacking that for us. I found it really useful. Where can people find that report?
Yeah, thanks for that. So people can find it on the RAND website and also pinned in my Twitter profile.
And if you're not following her, you absolutely should be. So our second story is that we have now hit the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was marked maybe also with pomp and circumstance, but also with the French President Macron saying that we are experiencing the, quote, brain death of NATO, which the German Chancellor Merkel has immediately rejected. Tom, what does this 30-year retrospective actually look like?
Thanks, Michelle. I'm actually old enough to have been around in this field when this happened 30 years ago. I had been about a year in this field at that time. And it's interesting to go back and remember what it was like. I mean, this was a very heady, promising time. I mean, people really thought there would be a renaissance in U.S.-Russian relationship, that we would have a peace dividend, and that we would shift large amounts of defense spending to domestic needs that no longer had to be focused on countering the Russian threat. People talked about the arms race going into reverse and eliminating nuclear weapons. At the time, nuclear weapons analysts were leaving the field because they thought this was just going to be gone in 5 or 10 years. And now look at us now. All right, here we are 30 years later. The U.S.-Russian relationship is as bad as it has ever been. Defense budgets are going through the roof, and both Russia and the United States are rebuilding their nuclear arsenals at the tune of trillions of dollars. So what happened? How did we squander that opportunity so badly? And people will have their various opinions on this, as we have many retrospectives, as I'm sure we will, on what are the lessons of the Cold War or the end of the Cold War. But for me, the pivotal moment was really 1996, when the Clinton administration began the process of extending NATO over Russia's objections. And that, to me, really told to the Russians, we don't have your back. We're not really friends. We're just pretending. And we're going to kick you when you're down. And great nations do not forget things like that. And we can run that all the way through to Putin taking over parts of Ukraine and the terrible relationships that we have today.
And you just actually put out a recent piece looking at, you talk about that shift that never happened in our defense spending in terms of replacing the current set of land-based missiles.
Right. So Akshay Vikram, who is our Hale Fellow here, and I just wrote an op-ed about the U.S. Program to rebuild the ground-based ballistic missile. And this is one
National Interest, in case anyone was
wondering. In National Interest magazine. And this is one of those things that, we have to stop and think, 30 years after the end of the Cold War, why are we rebuilding this weapon system whose only purpose is to conduct a first strike against Russia, against which, we haven't been really at odds as an adversary for 30 years. And what we find, it has less to do with security now and much more with jobs and defense contracts. Huge amounts of money. This missile will cost upwards of $100 billion when all is said and done. And so the Cold War has become institutionalized, bureaucratized, and we're not realizing that the threats in many respects are gone.
So last word goes to Ariane as we look at this. I mean, that's the U.S.-Russian look. NATO is the territory in some ways caught in between.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only thing I think that I can add to what Tom said is that, I'm a firm believer in NATO, but we have to recognize that there are a number of challenges plaguing it today. And, in some ways, we have to give credit to the president for identifying those challenges and for setting the objective of addressing them. I think where we part ways, and many, others in this country and elsewhere also part ways with him, is the means by which he's trying to do that.
And with that, our time is up. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Letters, we get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
And now, our question and answer segment. I know Joe has, again, not seen the question.
That's right.
You ready for this?
I am. Let's go.
Okay. Today's question is from Kayvon in Los Angeles. Joe, if you had to bet, would you bet that the 21st century will see a nuclear weapon used in anger or that it won't?
Wow. Wow, you really want me to call it, huh? This is tough. You know, I'm afraid I think we are going to see one. I really do. We are working as hard as we can to prevent a nuclear war, and there are thousands of people in this country and around the world working to get rid of these nuclear weapons. But you know, I don't think enough people believe us. I think they're lulled into this complacency that because they don't see these weapons, because they're not in the news every day, because it's not like the sea level rising, which you can physically see, that they think, well, everything's under control. It is not under control. You have to be an incredible optimist to think that we can keep 14,000 nuclear weapons in fallible human hands and something terrible is not going to happen. Something terrible is going to happen. And just in the last couple of years, we've seen this administration rip down the nuclear guardrails, the safety agreements that have put us on the path of reducing nuclear weapons, controlling nuclear weapons, stopping the spread of these nuclear weapons. These policies have impact. You can't argue that policy matters and then see terrible policy being put into effect and somehow optimistically think something terrible isn't going to happen. I do. It's hard to predict where. On a later podcast, we're going to have Jeffrey Lewis update us on his fictional 2020 Commission report on a North Korea attack on America, which is right on schedule, as it turns out.
Yes, Bolton was just fired, just like in the story.
In his novel, Bolton is fired right around this time, and the negotiations collapse, and a nuclear conflict erupts in the spring of 2020. So North Korea is a possibility. I think most experts worry about South Asia, those stockpiles there. But there's also the possibility, we keep warning about this, of an accidental launch by malfunction, by miscalculation, or by a crazed leader. There are leaders around the world, 9 nuclear powers, have the ability for any one of those leaders to press the button and launch a nuclear weapon. So yes, I'm afraid I think we are going to see another nuclear catastrophe in this time in the 21st century. Thank you for asking.
Another week, another question. Thanks, Joe.
I am just delighted to be here with Tristan Guyette and Colleen Moore, both with Beyond the Bomb, a new grassroots movement to prevent nuclear war. One of the things that you say on your beautiful website is that it's a small team of people. So if you don't mind, Tristan, why don't you start off by telling us what Beyond the Bomb is and how small are you?
Absolutely. So we're a small but mighty team. We get a lot done for the 4 of us. So our goal is to end the threat of nuclear war through very intersectional work. So we focus on the victims of nuclear testing. So we work to uplift the voices of people who've been impacted by our nuclear weapons system, whether that's through nuclear testing, whether that's through the fact that we spend so much money on nuclear weapons that we can't afford healthcare or education for our citizens. So it's a huge issue that impacts all of these other social issues. And we like to think of nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear war as issue 0. Because if nuclear war breaks out tomorrow, all of our work on other social issues ends because nuclear war has broken out. Right? We can't work on equality. We can't work on, advancing civil rights. We can't work on ending racism if all we can focus on is the fact that the world is ending around us.
Yes. So those are the issues you focus on, but how do you focus on them? What does Beyond the Bomb do, Colleen?
Yeah, so we kind of have 3 areas that we focus on. So partnerships, field, and digital. So I'm the digital person, Tristan's our field organizer, and then Yasmin Silva is our partnerships person.
Yes.
But they all work together. Like,
may I say that you have a beautiful website?
Oh, thank you.
Is that you?
So I'm the one that maintains it. I am not the one that came up with the initial idea. So that goes back to someone in the past. Yeah.
And what's the web address if people want to go there and take a look?
So that's beyondthebomb.org.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous, and it's very friendly and very, very involving. And where do you operate? Where exactly is Beyond the Bomb?
So we call our volunteers the Bomb Squad.
Oh, yes.
So we have
This
Bomb
is
Squad
great.
members everywhere. We have our fellows, which were graciously funded in part by Ploughshares Fund. And they're based, Rachel is in New Mexico, and she's doing some amazing work with the Tularosa Downwinder Basin Consortium right now, which really plays into our intersectional work and our focus on people who have been impacted. And we have Molly, who's a chemistry major in Houston. Tanetta and Victoria are both based out of Chicago. Gabby goes to Drake University in Des Moines. And Hope is actually at this very small private school in Pennsylvania called Juniata. And it's funny because I'm pretty sure every student at that school is now subscribed to our mailing list. They go out and do such great work. And it's amazed me because I haven't had to ask any of them to go out and petition. But just the other day, Rachel is texting me and she's like, hey, would it be okay if I went out to the farmer's market and petitioned? And of course, me on the other end of the line is like, yes, please do the thing. Our goal is to pass a no first use bill. So we are working with all of our students and all of our adult organizers and our fellows to pass this bill because we see it as a first step towards ending nuclear weapons and ending the threat of nuclear war. So to do that, we focus on writing letters to representatives, writing letters to the editor, really increasing engagement through building awareness of this issue, because so many people aren't even aware that nothing stands in the president's way of launching a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
There are no checks and balances here. It is the most undemocratic system I can think of in our country. And so the first step towards getting anyone to take action on that is to just make them aware of the problem. So, recently you and I were working on a panel at Cornell College in Iowa.
Yes, that's where we met.
Right.
Let me just interrupt for a second, if you don't mind. That was very impressive. I mean, I had come all the way down from Milwaukee, where I had just finished watching in a Milwaukee Brewers bar the wild card game with the Nationals. That was a great night. And I didn't know what to expect, but you had just packed the room. This was a big turnout on a college campus, filled with people who were actually interested in this. And this was your job? This was your doing?
So I work with Jessica Budlong, who is our organizer on that campus, and she did so much of the work there. She got the entire lacrosse team in that room. But yeah, that's what we do. We build that awareness, and we go out and we teach people that there's a problem, but immediately you follow that up with a solution. So yes, it's a huge issue that sole authority is a thing.
Yeah.
But there's something that you can do about it right now.
So what got you involved? Why did you start, Tristan? I mean, where were you when you suddenly decided this was the issue you wanted to work on?
So I don't have any national security background or nuclear weapons background. I've been an organizer. So I've worked on voting access, registering voters, abortion access in Ohio. So to me, what drew me to Beyond the Bomb was the fact that it takes all of these issues that I already cared about and it put them all together into issue zero, like I said. I can work on this issue and raise awareness on this and feel like I'm actually moving the needle here. Because what we hear when we talk to a lot of representatives is that they don't hear from their constituents about nuclear weapons very often. So to me, if you want to be involved in a cause where you can make an impact and see that change happen, go out and talk to your representative about nuclear weapons.
It's striking this balance between the urgency of the issue and saying that we need to act right now because things are really bad, and balancing that with fear-mongering. Because I think sometimes in this field, I mean, we're working on a issue like nuclear weapons, it forces people to shut down. Like, they're just seeing that, like, things are so bad that I don't have any agency in doing anything with this. So we give them specific things to do. It's making those connections with people across different demographics. Like, we're focusing a lot on young people with the fellowship, but then it's so much more than that. And I think it's appealing to them personally, because I think nuclear weapons are sometimes so far removed from people that you really have to bring it back into, like, why does this matter to me at this one moment to take action on this issue? And so it's making it personal. And I think the other is jumping on other movements and always relating it to the social justice fights that everyone is in. So I think, like, engaging with the broader peace movement, where, like, you're doing this one issue and this is part of it. Like, advocating for no first use is part of ending endless wars. It's part of the fight for Medicare for all. And I think it's just relating to people on a personal level.
Yeah, and I think it's also important right now to not make this a Trump issue, because Trump is a symptom of this problem that we have with this undemocratic system built on the back of marginalized communities, let's be honest. Trump has made the issue very clear. But eventually he'll be out of office, and we'll still have sole authority. We'll still have no checks and balances on our nuclear weapons system. So this is an issue that needs to be bipartisan and needs to appeal to everyone. And it's great that Trump is bringing attention to this issue through ridiculous things like wanting to nuke hurricanes. But, right. So it helps bring attention. But we need to be very careful that we're using that attention to attack the root cause of the problem and not to make this a Trump issue, so that in 2020, if someone else is elected, we don't lose momentum. Because right now, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are both on the Senate no first use bill. So we have such a strong chance of passing this in 2020 if one of them is elected. But we need to keep people concerned about the issue enough to keep pushing for it after 2020.
And what is it that brought you to Washington? What are you here for?
Yeah, so this weekend we have our annual training called Squad Lab. So we're bringing all of our bomb squad ambassador volunteers and our fellows and a lot of amazing high school students from Alaska and across the country. So we're bringing them for 2 days this weekend to do a training. And we have everything from teaching them on digital organizing to why no first use and working with the media and intersectionality, and then, like, concrete steps they can take after that when they go back to New Mexico or Iowa or wherever, or Alaska. We have an amazing group from Alaska coming in. And so we're giving them, like, concrete tools and actions to take when they go back to their local communities.
This is great. I want to get into these issues, but first I want to get into this nice bag you brought me and pull out this thing. And maybe we can, when we do this podcast online, we'll show a photo of this. I love this shirt. This is for me?
Yes.
This
You're
is your
officially a bomb squad ambassador now.
What strikes me about the shirt is its militancy and its feminism. And is that what you're going for? By the way, is the bomb squad all women?
It's not all women. For our fellowship this year, and because we did get funding for it through Ploughshares Women's Initiative, we focused on hiring women to help bring more women into this space. And also what I love about them is that they're not just political science majors. You know, we have a chemistry major, we have a physics major. So these are kids that, you know, probably never would have been involved in nuclear weapons otherwise. And now they're making that connection and seeing, like, oh, nuclear weapons do impact these other things that I care about, even if I'm not interested in national security or policy like that normally.
So this is the issue I want to talk to you about, this intersectionality, this other one of your organizing principles. This is a word I only learned about 2.5 years ago when I went to the Women's March, and right after Trump was inaugurated on January 21st, 2017. And I know this is a word that's been around for a long time, but it was new to me. And it struck me that this is how we're going to build this movement. We're not going to have a nuclear mass movement like we had in the 1980s, but we don't need to, because there already is this vibrant mass movement going on in America. And what we need to do is bring our issue into that movement and to adopt the causes that movement has as ours. Am I getting this right? Is that what intersectionality means?
Yes, exactly. The nuclear movement, the anti-nuclear movement actually started from an intersectional lens. So back in during the Cold War, like the nuclear freeze movement, actually the origins of the peace sign, because it does have a nuclear background, and it started in Britain as an anti-nuclear symbol, but it had like the implications of that and how it's been used is so intersectional at its core. So it's always about uplifting how nuclear weapons impact communities in a way, like marginalized communities, right? And so it's about uplifting all of those other movements as well. So it's jumping in on the climate change movement. Like we worked a lot with the Green New Deal. It's about like how do nuclear weapons come into play with when we're talking about like Yemen, and how does it all intersect, right? Because nuclear weapons aren't inherently a part of like the conversation about Yemen, and like ending US support for the war in Yemen, but it's also intertwined because it's this patriarchal system, this elitist system that we're trying to take down.
Do both of you consider yourself feminists?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
And were you feminist before you were anti-nuclear, or?
Yes.
You know, Elizabeth Warren talks on her campaign about how the system is broken, and she talks about it in healthcare, she talks about it in consumer protections or in agribusiness. And to me, that resonates with me on nuclear weapons. I think our system of deciding what weapons we need to build, of allocating the money for those nuclear weapons is broken. And has to be fixed.
We shouldn't be having a conversation about tactical or low-yield nuclear weapons. Like, we should not be considering how we would fight a nuclear war. That shouldn't be on the table.
Adam Smith said exactly the same thing when we had him for our conference. He says the idea that you're even having this discussion about a manageable nuclear war is insane.
One thing that Marissa Conway's piece brought up was the concept of agency. And it's the fact that we have people at the top making decisions, and those decisions are impacting people that they're not even talking to. The people that are being impacted by nuclear weapons are not even at the table making those decisions. And so that's why feminism comes into play. It's about elevating and uplifting those voices, but it's ultimately because the nuclear system is an elitist system. It's a patriarchal system.
And it's a system that's kept women out of the conversation for the longest time. Very rarely do women get a seat at the table in nuclear weapons decisions, let alone peace talks, even though we know statistically women cause peace talks to be more durable and more successful. It's statistically proven.
But it's not just about having women at the table, right? We've had women national security advisors. We've had women secretaries of state. I'm not sure they've changed the system very much.
I would agree with that. I think it does matter which women you have at the table. However, are they at the table and being listened to? Or are they just at the table to be the woman at the table?
And I think part of it is just changing the principles behind it, because just because women are at the table, like you're saying, the system isn't necessarily changing. And part of that is because maybe they're not being listened to, but I think they've come into a masculine space. And I think women do feel the pressure to kind of conform to that. And I think that's one of the reasons the system isn't changing. We're not coming at it from feminist principles. It's not only increasing the number, but it's the reasoning behind it.
Right. This is also something I've been educated on by our wonderful staff at Ploughshares Fund, that gender equity isn't just about equal numbers.
Exactly.
Right.
And there's also this belief that if you want to talk about peace as a real solution, that's a woman's thing. Like, that's a very feminine thing for some reason. And so the idea of talking about peace and options that aren't war has been scorned for years and years because it's not masculine.
Right, it's weak.
Right.
Yeah, our very first podcast talked about this, the genderization of the nuclear weapons issue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. So you consider yourself feminist, you consider yourself anti-nuclear activist, and Tristan, you said you were originally, one of the first issues you organized around was what?
So voting registration and abortion access is where I've worked before.
So you also see yourself as organizers.
Yeah, I think
first and foremost.
That's what we are at our core, all of the Beyond the Bomb staff members. Like, even though I do the digital engagement work, I'm an organizer. I'm organizing to get education efforts out there. We're mobilizing people. Like, I don't see myself as like a communications professional. I'm an organizer, you know? I'm a campaigner.
It's very similar to how I started. I was a student organizer at Boston College. I organized the Psychology Students Council because we didn't feel that we were being listened to by the administration on the kinds of courses we were being offered. It was as simple as issue as that. And then that morphed into the Vietnam War, and I became an anti-war organizer.
Great.
And I've always seen myself, like you, primarily an organizer. Whatever else I do, I organize.
Exactly. Like, even though I've taken on more digital communications efforts now at both Global Zero and Beyond the Bomb, like, it always comes back to what is our larger campaign? What is our larger goal? How is every effort that I'm doing right now connected to that larger goal?
So how do you feel? What do you think the prospects are? As you look forward, how do you feel about your chances of success?
Well, I think the most powerful thing you can do to organize people is to give them a cause that is tangible and time sensitive and realistic, and there's hope in that. And there is so much hope in the 2020 election. Like I said earlier, you know, Warren and Sanders are both on the bill, and we have students in the field going out to these events and talking to presidential candidates and other candidates for just other elected offices as well. So we've got this moment here in 2020 that we can seize. We have the concern from people having seen Trump. So we've got that education and awareness building. And then we have a solution, like, so fresh on the horizon, especially with Adam Smith as the HASC chair as well. And Adam Smith wrote the No First Use bill.
That's right.
So I think it's a great time to be organizing on this issue because it's a time you can make some changes.
Yeah, I'm also very hopeful, and I think we're right there. We're almost there. And I think that Beyond the Bomb is also positioned for if a variety of things happen, of a variety of different outcomes of the election. And I think we're hopeful, but we're also prepared for everything. And that's one of the reasons that Tristan brought up, like, we don't want to focus just on Trump. Like, there's so many things that can happen in the next year and a half, right? And we're prepared for it all.
Right. We're going to have to wrap up, and I'm going to do that by opening up the rest of the bag that you brought me. By the way, I just love this T-shirt. It's
so
really,
glad.
It feels great.
And if anyone else would like one, you can pick them up on bonfire.com/no-first-use.
Very good. Very good. I actually may end up giving this to my daughter, so I have to buy another one for myself. And also in here I have notepad. What's this? What problems would you solve in a nuclear-free world?
So this is something that our students use when they table on campus. It gets people thinking about what the $1.7 trillion that we're going to spend on modernizing our nuclear weapons.
That's great. And I'm afraid to say what this is on the air, but it appears to be condoms.
Every year, thousands of Americans practice unsafe nuclear weapons policy.
Oh, yeah. Why don't you read what it says on it?
It says, make love, not war. Every year, millions of people are at risk from unsafe nuclear policy. Protect yourself at beyondthebomb.org.
That's great. And what are these yellow? These are things you put in your car, things you put in your house?
We actually made these for the Women's March last year, where we had a contingent of anti-nuclear women's activists. So this is a graphic of Trump riding a nuclear weapon, and it says the nuclear arsenal won't make up for your insecurities. No more nukes. So yeah, we have these up around our office. Feel free to put them around the Ploughshares office. Give them out.
I will. Okay, now here's something I actually can use. Lip balm?
Indeed.
Everyone can use some lip balm.
A message with this? No, just beyondthebomb.org.
No, we just really had chapped lips and...
All about the promotion, all about the branding.
Well, you guys are doing fabulous work. Just thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you wanted to say that we didn't get our chance to talk about?
I think if you spent the last 20 minutes listening to us, you should take at least 2 more minutes to go to our website and write your representative.
Yes.
I write those letters for you. That's my job. My job is literally to construct these messages for you to send.
Yes,
So
we've already done the work for you. You just have to click send.
Go put your zip code in and do something today.
Yes.
Fabulous. A great message and great organizing. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to Press the Button. This podcast is produced by Delphine Vigil, Zach Brown, Derek Zender, Alex Spire, and Will Lowry. Sound design by Derek Zender. Audio engineering by Derek Zender and Will Lowry. Research by Alex Spire. Our theme song is by Lyrics Born and the Poets of Rhythm, sampled with kind permission. Additional music by San Francisco-based bands 17 Evergreen and the Society of Rockets. To continue the dialogue and support our work, visit ploughshares.org.